Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Think Small podcast. And today, our guest is Joe Fannin with Austin Elefant, an Austin, Texas-based residential services business. Joe, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so what I'd like to do is talk about how you got into this business. Give me a little bit about your background, and then we'll jump into really what Austin Elefant is all about.
Okay. Long story short, I needed a job. And
I love it.
uh, that's how I got into this industry. And I worked for a gentleman that became kind of like a father figure to me. He was a
Mm,
mentor and taught me a lot when I was in my young 20s. But I didn't enjoy sitting and doing desk work. I enjoyed working with my hands. And so when I fell into this, I just really found myself just enjoying it, almost having fun. And I started cleaning windows and doing pressure washing and just learning really from the bottom up and learning to work on ladders. I was very uncomfortable at first
mm.
and kind of had to grow through a lot of the growing pains, if you will, of getting into this industry.
So when did you found the company?
I started in 2013. We were Fannin Professional Services back then, and I kind of found myself with a glass ceiling where I was at. I wanted to do more. I wanted to grow the other business that I was a part of. I was managing at that time after being there for about
Mhm.
3 years. But just kind of due to where I was in my life, I decided to go on my own. And I started with just a truck and a ladder and some squeegees and put myself
Yeah,
out there, built a
that's incredible.
website.
So
Yeah.
okay, so you had the forethought to build out a website while you were literally, chief cook and bottle washer, as the phrase goes. Running and starting your own business. You were literally doing all of the work and all of the back end that needed to get developed to start a business. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Um, wow. So owning and running this business for, gosh, 16 years now. Tell me about some times when, obviously when you're growing, you're out there, you're hustling, you're trying to get new customers, into your fold. And but tell me about a time when that was a little bit challenged, right? When there was a little bit of a slowdown or maybe a plateau of business coming in. How did you manage through that?
That's a great question. There's been many times that I've had to pivot or kind of reevaluate what we were doing and how we were going about getting new clients. Obviously, everybody tells you, the lowest hanging fruit is right there in front of you. It's your current client base. But as you're starting, you're trying to get everything you can get. And
Right.
so, I've there's many times that I wasted money on marketing and failed, and it was frustrating because you didn't have much money to begin with. And I think one time I did it wasn't Group Me or I mean a Groupon, but it was a similar company. And so we sold
Okay.
these Groupon type of deals, and the marketing people behind it were very persuasive that this is going to work and you're going to get you're going to get so much extra out of it. And I literally lost money, and those people were not returning customers. They wanted the cheapest thing.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, you kind of end up scrambling at times, and it doesn't always work. you know.
You,
But
you know,
there's
you
other
you
times that it would just be reaching out to our current client base and just pushing for referrals or giving an incentive to get a referral. Whether it's a credit in-house or a gift card or a 10%, referral fee. You kind of got to just reach out and find a way to connect.
Very interesting. And what I really appreciate you putting out there is that you tried some different things and you failed. But if you didn't make those attempts, you wouldn't learn from your failures. And I think that's kind of a common theme within the audience here at the Think Small podcast. So I think that really resonates with a lot of people.
Yes, I mean, I think there's plenty of times that I felt like I was just throwing money in the trash can. And, it's not a good feeling, but it when you do something and you hope and expect some type of ROI, at least to break even, and then you don't, you're like,
Right.
well, that did not work, and I'm not going to do that again. Lesson
Exactly.
learned, check that box. We'll move on to
Right.
the next opportunity.
Right. Right. So, let's give our audience a little bit more flavor as to what exactly Austin Elephant does for your customers. What problems are you solving out?
I like to joke and say that we are dirt relocation specialists. So we
Oh my
clean
gosh. Say that again.
dirt relocation specialists.
Oh my gosh. I love
So
that.
we clean windows, we clean gutters, we power wash, we do soft washing on roofs and houses, we do deck and fence restoration.
Okay.
I've done chandeliers that the size of a Volkswagen Beetle in a giant mansion. So that's why I joke about we're relocating the dirt. It's on
I love it.
something and we take it off and leave with it. So that's really, I guess, the best way to summarize what we do. But we're more in the relationship business with our clientele. Real estate, whether it's commercial or residential, is one of the biggest investments people will have, and we're here to be the person that helps mitigate, your losses and the damage that can be done with neglect.
Absolutely. So it sounds like you're both doing exterior and some interior work, correct? I mean, you
Yes,
mentioned the chandelier. That's very different than pressure washing the exterior of a house. Um,
yes. So primarily it was window cleaning, and then people would ask, "Oh, can you clean this light fixture, or can you clean our ceiling fan? We can't get to it." Because
sure.
we roll around with ladders that go up to 3 or 4 stories on our trucks at all times. So a lot of times people are like, "Well, hey, while you're here, could you maybe clean that over there, or something that's really hard to reach?" And at one time, I went to do a quote for this property that was like a 10,000 square foot mansion, and it had
Wow.
chandeliers everywhere. A giant grand chandelier in the middle of their great room, but the dining room had a chandelier the size of the kitchen, the dining table was just as big as that. And then the bathrooms had chandeliers and crystals everywhere. And I thought for sure, I really honestly didn't want to do it. It just seemed overwhelming. It was a lot of crystals. It was a lot of shiny, fragile things. And so I increased my bid thinking, oh, they won't hire us to do this. And then next thing you know, they approved it. I'm like, when can you get it done? And so I was like, oh my gosh, all right, well, we're going to do this. And we had to get some scaffolding set up so that we could get to this giant chandelier. And we had to cover everything. There's a piano and just a giant house, and everything everywhere you turn was just like another liability of something that was going to go wrong. And
Yeah.
needless to say, we got it done. It looked perfect. Everybody loved it. The house was for sale. They sold it, but that was one of the challenges that you don't really think you're going to come across, and then you try to talk yourself out of it, and you're still doing it.
Well, that's good, right? You're adding value to that customer who connected with you in the first place for completely different services, and I like to use the phrase land and expand. So that's exactly what you did in that case.
Yeah, I mean it was an easy upsell because we were already pressure washing and doing window cleaning and
Sure.
stuff like that. And I hadn't seen the property, but they asked me over the phone, "Well, can y'all clean chandeliers?" And I was like, "Oh, sure." I've done some complicated chandeliers, but I had never even contemplated how big these could be and how many little crystals would be on these. I mean, one of them had to have had almost 1,000 crystals on it.
Oh my goodness.
So, it was the last thing I
Wow.
expected to show up to when they're like, "Well, tell me how much it's going to cost."
Right, right. Well, you kind of had to take that one on the fly, and you came out successful. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Being in business for 16 years, obviously, it's more than just you, right, Joe? There's more employees with Austin Elephant than just Joe. So tell me about that growth, and tell me where the business is now as far as employee size and coverage area, things like that.
Okay. So, over the years, I've hired, I don't know, probably over 100 people in the time that we've been in business. One person that's been here since almost the very beginning, like I hired him one of my first year. Um, He's our operations manager. He's like my little brother. We worked together for 13 years.
Hmm.
And I basically taught him everything I could, and then he took off, and he knows more than I do now, as far as like in the field and operationally. We've grown and we've shrank, and before COVID, we were up to 10 employees. We found how inefficient we were, and we kind of dialed back on who we were working with and got a little bit more selective. And
Hmm.
so now we're down to 5 employees, but we're turning over more revenue and we're more efficient than we were with the 10. So I like to say we have the right people in the right places. And now we're really focused on just keeping recurring clients and really building that relationship to where we're helping manage their properties instead of just doing one-off kind of things.
Yeah. So that's a real interesting thing you said there. You're more efficient now with less employees, and I'm assuming fewer customers. Is that true? Or do
Fewer
you actually have
customers,
more?
higher tickets. Yeah, we're doing more work at less locations.
So you made the conscious decision to essentially fire some customers.
Yeah,
That
essentially, yes.
I work with my clients here at Chief Outsiders, and sometimes we get to that conclusion, and sometimes it's really tough for a business owner to wrap their head around the fact that they're going to see a better business on the other side of that door, but I've got to fire customers to do that. That just doesn't sound, it sounds counterintuitive. So how did you get you and your business to that point?
I think it was one of the hardest lessons to learn, to be honest. At first, when I was by myself or I was very small, I had one employee. I tried to take on every job I could get, and some
Sure.
of those jobs weren't a good fit, or maybe it was just a little outside of my wheelhouse. And then I had the stress of like, okay, I need to make sure I do this right. My reputation's on the line. I don't want to mess this up. But throughout that growth process of learning to say no to clients, I think is a huge lesson for small businesses because you feel like you're turning away money, especially if you have employees, and you feel like you're turning away work that can provide for people. But at the same time, you're turning away the headache and you're saving yourself the stress or perhaps other problems like just complaints or callbacks or whatever it could be. And it doesn't matter what business you're in. We should be able to refuse services to somebody for whatever reason it is. And it's not a bias factor. I think it's more about you're not my ideal customer, and my customer avatar is this, and you define what your customer avatar is, what their lifestyle is, what their expectations are. And if we can't see eye to eye on that, then you're going to have problems. You're going to have, I've had people do chargebacks on services that we've completed just because they could and just try to save their money back, right? And you're like, look,
Right.
the services were complete. We did a good job. I have pictures of proof. And then you have to go through the credit card dispute. Well,
Mm.
don't do work with those people again, right? That's the
Right.
easy
Right.
one. But there's other times that, sometimes if you have employees, especially in the service business, some people are just rude to your staff or they treat them like they're a peon. And
Yeah.
I take that feedback to heart as well is when my staff tells me that they had a hard time with this customer or they sometimes it's like if you give a mouse a cookie kind of thing, next thing you know, they want a glass of milk. Well, they do that to us as well. It's like, oh, well, while you're here, can you move this furniture? And then can you do this? And then that. And
Sure.
next thing you know, we're not a moving company and we're not a maid service. And so I don't know that sometimes people realize they're doing this, but they're kind of taking advantage of people that are being nice and helpful. So in the gist of it, it's just really paying attention to people that appreciate your services and your staff. And the
Hmm.
same thing that like our team gets tips all the time because they do a good job and they treat the clients well and they have good manners. And then, my team will come back like, hey, they gave me $100 tip today, both of us. So people are shelling out a couple extra $100 when they don't have to. It's not expected. Our staff is paid well, they have full benefits, but on top of that, they're getting a good tip. So I think all of those things, you just sometimes being an observer of that is telling you that you're in the right place and you're working with the right people.
Yeah, but sometimes you have to go through some of those tougher customer situations in order to find those you need to fire, correct?
Yes, yes,
Okay, all right. And I certainly understand, right? Separating yourself from customers that are, giving you chargebacks or slow pays or certainly are rude to your staff. But have you made under any other decisions relative to like getting out of specific services or or any other ways to decide which customers you're not going to go after or which services you're not going to go after?
yes. There's not very many that I've tried to do and then pulled away from. We used to do screen repair, like window
Hmm,
screens. That one just it became a lot of inventory for not a lot of sales. Like the ROI wasn't really there for the amount of accessories and things that we had to keep in stock to do it, or I was buying more stuff just to fix one thing. Um, so yeah, I think there's certain services that it becomes like it's a whole nother truck or it's a whole nother crew. And if
oh,
you don't have the staff to support that or, the means to, then that is a challenge. It's like, I guess you could put it like, because I did a lot of handyman work when I first started, and having to buy one big tool to do one small job takes out of your profit. And I would find
certainly.
myself early on when I first started, I was willing to do whatever. But then you're like, wow, I got to spend $500 to make $800. And does this make sense? No, it really doesn't. But I'm here and I'm in the middle of this job and I need to get it done. So yeah,
Right.
there's definitely been times that I've come across that. There's liability involved with what we do. We deal with high ladders and there's I would say it's not necessarily services that we've cut out, but there's jobs that I've just said, no, we're not a good fit. This isn't worth it. The risk is too high. We need somebody else that can handle this in a different way. And here in Austin, we have a lot of hilly areas, and the hill country is just outside of the area. And
Sure.
people are like, well, can't you just get like a man lift over here or like some kind of crane thing to do the work? And they have no clue. Like, no, I can't drive a lift down a valley into a canyon. Like there's no possible way. You could barely get your vehicle into your parking driveway. Uh,
Right.
but it's just being practical, and that I think that's hopefully I'm answering your question well, that sometimes it's just not a good fit, and whether it's liability or risk factor.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the easier times you get to say no to something is based on something like your insurance coverage. Granted,
Yes.
I get it. You probably have a lot of different requirements for insurance coverage, and you know what? If your insurance just doesn't cover you for something, or you don't feel safe in doing a job, I think that's probably an easy no to say to a customer.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. That's really interesting. So you're in a really good spot relative to employee count and the types of customers you're going after and the profitability. It does sound like too that you are measuring your profitability kind of by service line. Am I safe to say that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So you're really kind of segmenting your products and understanding what drives the profits of your business. And I think that's a great lesson for folks in our podcast, right? It's not just a one big bucket, but if you're doing 10 different things as a business, what is driving that profitability of the overall business? So
Yeah, and I think, obviously different businesses have different niche or things that are really making them good money. And it also comes down to what's the cost to advertise or your customer acquisition, cost. Um, for us, like we do window cleaning, it's one of our bread and butters, but it's more of a loss leader that gets us in the
okay,
door for other
yeah,
things that we can provide. I'm going to make a lot more money doing pressure washing or fence staining. But my leg in the door a lot of times is just to clean their windows. And I've also found people will just try us out with one small thing, like getting their gutters cleaned or getting their windows cleaned on the outside to test how we operate, to test how we communicate, and just to feel out our professionalism. And sometimes after that, then they're like, okay, well, now I want this, and this done. And it explodes from there or snowballs from when you thought it was just going to be one tiny little, like, one-time job. Uh,
Right.
but I think that's a savvy buyer, right? You're not going to go in and just buy everything from a company. You sometimes we as consumers want to make sure that this is a good fit for us if we're the consumer. And I think there's, in my experience, especially being in the service industry for a long time, some companies give everybody else a bad rap for doing bad work or being lazy, you know?
Yeah.
And so if a customer's gone through that experience, which I would call buyer's remorse, where you're like, well, I hired that guy and he did a terrible job. I could have done what he did. But then when they go to hire the next company, they're a lot more skeptical. They're going to be paying attention more to how you operate and how you handle yourself. And I've had people tell me they hired a guy, and this was like a 3-story house. The guy had a 6-foot ladder, didn't even have towels to help clean the windows. And he has to borrow the towels from this lady, her own
Oh gosh.
kitchen towels or her bath towels or whatever. And so when I showed up to give her a quote, I was actually in one of our work trucks, I think, that day, but we have stacks of ladders on our trucks, all sizes that you could ever need on a job site. And she immediately was like, oh, wow, you have ladders? And I just laughed, like, what do you mean? Like, I'm in the business of getting to things that are hard to get to. Why wouldn't I show up with a ladder? But
Oh, you're a real business. You're not
yeah,
just
right.
chucking a truck.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard it all. It's funny, but it's also shocking to think that businesses can operate on such a low level of standard. And we've taken it to the opposite. Like I said, I show up with everything I might need, and I may not use it all, but I'll have it if I need it. And I think
Right.
that's what a good business should have.
Absolutely. So what does the future look like for Austin Elephant?
We're really just focused this year. I have a dry erase board over here with a target, and I'm trying to get to 400 quarterly clients by the end of the year, which is a huge stretch. I'm
Okay.
pushing myself. It's one of those things that I've done in sales training and business mentorship is that if you don't put it on paper, it's not on purpose. So you got to write it down, put your goal out there.
Amen.
And the goal for us is to fill in our slow seasons with these recurring clients, and just make it to our calendar is like a giant pie chart that's filled in with work every single month. It sounds crazy to me because I know I've been doing this for a long time. It sounds like a huge reach as a goal, but I just landed like 3 yesterday. So I can do this. I know I can.
Yeah.
But like I mentioned earlier, we're in the relationship business. We're just following up with our current clientele, reminding them that we're here for them and we're ready to take on more things. We all, as people owning properties and families and working, life goes by and you forget. And so we're trying to just continuously remind people, hey, it's been this much time. It's time for this. It's time to get some cleaning done. When was the last time you looked at this? And that's really where we're going right now. So I just want to show up more.
So another thing I wanted to talk to you about, Joe, was your a relatively young company, right? About 13 years in business, but you recently went through a major change in your corporate identity. So tell me about that process. And what was the driver of that? What was your former identity, and what made you change to a new one? And how has that process gone for you? I've been a part of some businesses that have gone through major corporate identities changes, and it didn't go well. You end up actually losing customers because of some confusion. So tell me about your journey there.
Okay, so I started out as Fannin Professional Services. Fannin is my last name.
Okay.
And I was naive. I was 26 years old and never really learned much about business. My brother was a businessman, a solopreneur, if you will. So I learned a lot of my ethics from him, but I didn't really have any marketing skills or bookkeeping, or I really just was like, how hard can it be? I'm going to go do it, you know? And so I started at a point of naivety, and then I started learning. And as we grew, I mean, I hired two people in my first year, and I wasn't expecting that. Like, I didn't have a business plan that was well thought out of like the future. I had a plan to like get to work and do the work and pay bills, but I didn't really have a plan for expansion or marketing.
Okay.
And so as I grew and I learned and I had a few employees and then more, I found myself where I had more time to sit and think and work on like the business instead of working in the business. And I took sales courses, I took business mentor training, and I slowly realized that like I didn't really have a good mascot. Our logo was based off of the Capitol here in Austin, so it was a recognizable thing, and I did that intentionally because everybody when I started my company were like, "Oh yeah, I've seen you around," and I knew I had just started, but I chose the logo with it was basically a 2D version of the Capitol building,
Sure.
and so it worked for the time being. But over time, I realized that if they didn't remember my last name, they didn't remember me or the company.
Yeah.
And so then it was like, okay, well, that's not good for retention and that's not good for marketing. But also, then I had employees wearing my last name on their shirt. And that was another factor to me that, you know, they were working for Fannin Professional Services and their identity was as a team, but they were wearing my name. And so it kind of had a conflict in that in my own mind. It was my own internal conflict. So long story short, you know, between the marketing sense and the concept that people needs to remember a logo, you know, something that stands out that they can remember. That's what we were missing. You know, we just didn't have that um, part of the market share. People knew me. We were busy. People loved our work, but we were missing that other section of it. So I had been brewing on it for years, and I finally bit the bullet a couple of years ago. It took a couple rounds of different people to work on the logo. The first couple just weren't where I wanted them to be. They just didn't pop and they didn't hit that mark. And so I threw some money in the trash can a couple times on that one.
Sure.
But I finally I found a good company that I had known of, but I didn't quite think I was going to be able to afford it. And then I realized, well, I kind of just threw money away. I could have afforded it easier had I just gone to them first,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
it's the same thing as buyer's remorse, like we were talking about earlier, that we have to go through these lessons to really elevate, you know, our thinking. And so we went through a few rounds, and they really understood what my goal and concept was. And then I said, well, I want my elephant to be like blowing up bubbles. And so we added a little bit more fun, um, I guess, cartoonization to it, just to make it a little bit more memorable. And then they showed me their concepts, and I was blown away because it totally basically what I was thinking of became a reality, like what I envisioned through this marketing concept. So once it came together, in the back end, I was working on what is our culture going to look like? And if we're going to go with an elephant, well, what are elephants known for? Well, they're known for being very smart. They have a good sense of community. They're nurturing, and they can move mountains, right? They're just giant beasts. And so from that, we took that and kind of built our core values around that, which was our community. We're here to serve our community. We give back to nonprofits. We work with nonprofits. We volunteer through nonprofits for our community. But also we do move mountains. We move a lot of dirt. We do a lot of hard concept things that people are not
Right.
ready for. But then we also we nurture our community as well with education and just trying to be there for our clients. So it all kind of became a full circle thing, and I was like really giddy. So then I had to start our website change, and then it all came together. I started in the beginning of 2023, and we launched it in 2024.
Okay. And did you notice any you know contraction of customers because of the branding confusion, or were you able to mitigate that pretty well?
I don't think there was much confusion. I did have people ask me who I sold the company to and just assumed that I had exited or
Okay.
was in the process of an acquisition. But we nurtured our client list, and we sent them out several notifications that, hey, we're rebranding. Our website had a pop-up saying, hey, we're rebranding. Same staff, same company, same owner. So we nurtured that side of it. And we have clients that only use us every few years, right? And that's understandable too for a budget sense.
Sure.
So we're still educating those clients. But I don't know that I've noticed any like contraction of like a loss of clientele. It was also an intentional thing to let go of some clients, like we talked about earlier, the 80-20 rule, where 20% of your clients going to be 80% of your problems, and that
Exactly.
can apply to many things. But in that sense, it was like it's time to shift and focus on like what is beneficial for us and our client. Our customer avatar is somebody that wants to hire us often and is somebody that's happy to have us kind of run their maintenance schedule for them and inform them when it's time to do things. It's like when would you take your car to the mechanic and tell them what type of tools to use and what fluid brands to use, and then tell them and stand over their shoulder and tell them when they're doing something wrong? Like we don't do that. We don't want that
Hmm.
done to us, right? We don't dictate to the professionals how they should do their job. And so I think that's the same premise for what we were looking for, is people that appreciate what we do and allow us to just be successful at that.
Okay. Yeah, I really get that, and I guess it makes sense that you wouldn't necessarily have a lot of customer fallout from your branding transition if you're out there and upfront and communicative about what that change is going to look like. So well done. Um,
Yeah,
so are there plans for geographic expansion, or what's on the 5 year horizon for Austin Elephant?
Austin's such a big city. The highways are tough to manage here. I think our next geographical expansion would be on the other side of the city.
Okay.
We have a river that splits us down the middle, and then we have two major highways that go north and south, and then two that go east and west. So it's not as a metropolitan area as some of the other ones that are easy to get around. So a lot of our focus also was to kind of stay regionally where our office is, so we spend less time driving. So
That
our
makes
next
sense.
step will be to expand into another location, just so that we have another region that we can really focus on, whether it's West Austin or north of Austin. I
Yeah.
haven't quite decided, but the city's been growing since I started. I think in 2013, when I first started the company, the statistics were there was 150 people moving here per day. And that increased.
Wow.
I think it was at 200 at some point. It may have leveled out and gotten to a plateau, but it's a booming city. The tech, industry is just blown up here with
Sure.
Apple and Samsung, and Dell has always been around, but it's a booming city, and there's lots of room to grow. So, another market might be on the horizon as well, but right now I enjoy being where I'm comfortable with what I have in front of me. Because I have had more employees, and we like I said, we weren't very efficient. So I'd rather do a slow grow process with the rebrand than just try to ramp it up like we did before.
Okay. Well, listen, we wish you all the best of luck in that expansion. It sounds like the Austin area specifically is you've got kind of like a logical progression of next growth steps, and still not be outside of the Austin, Texas market. So you won't have to rebrand again, right?
Right.
We're not going to see Houston Elephant anytime soon because you're going to have so much business in Austin.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, listen, Joe, I can't thank you enough for participating in our podcast today. Again, today our discussion has been with Joe Fannin. He's the owner and president of Austin Elefant in Austin, Texas. Joe, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.